The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, and within 3 hours, every government on Earth knew that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Ambassador Elena Vance was eating breakfast in her small apartment in Geneva when her phone rang. The caller was the Secretary General of the United Nations, and his voice was shaking. He told her to come immediately. He told her the world had changed. He told her that something had answered humanity's radio signals, and it was not friendly. Elena arrived at the emergency meeting to find the room filled with the most powerful leaders on Earth, presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists sat around a long table, all staring at a single piece of paper. The paper contained a translation of the alien message. Elena read it 3 times before she understood what it meant. The Galactic Council, governing body of over 4,000 spacefaring species, had noticed humanity. They had been watching Earth for decades, studying the radio signals and television broadcasts that leaked into space. Now they had made a decision. Humanity would travel to a place called Axis Prime and present itself before the Assembly of Elders. There humans would be evaluated for what the message called integration or intervention. No one in the room knew exactly what intervention meant. But the way the words sat on the page made everyone uncomfortable. It felt like a threat wrapped in polite language. The Council had included coordinates for a meeting point in space. Just beyond the orbit of Mars, they had also sent detailed instructions for building a simple, faster-than-light communication device. This was not a gift, the message explained. This was a test. If humanity could not build the device within 30 days, they were not worth the Council's time. An intervention would begin immediately. Earth scientists worked without sleep. They argued. They failed. They tried again. On the 28th day, the device activated. A cold, mechanical voice spoke through it, confirming that a ship would arrive to transport humanity's representative to Axis Prime. Now came the harder question. Who would speak for all of humanity? Elena did not volunteer for the job. She did not want it. She had spent 20 years as a diplomat, negotiating peace deals in war zones and talking armed men into releasing hostages. She was tired. She wanted to retire to a quiet house somewhere and read books until she died. But when the selection committee reviewed every possible candidate, her name kept rising to the top. She was calm under pressure. She did not panic when others screamed. She had a gift for understanding what people really wanted, even when they did not say it out loud. And most importantly, she had a quality that the committee could not quite put into words. She did not beg. She did not grovel. Even when facing impossible odds, Elena Vance carried herself. It's like someone who had already decided she would not break. The alien ship arrived exactly on schedule. It was enormous, a dark shape that blocked out the stars as it moved into position near Earth. A smaller shuttle detached and descended through the atmosphere, landing in a field outside Geneva. Elena walked toward it alone, carrying nothing but a small bag of personal items and a tablet, containing every piece of information humanity had gathered about the galaxy. The shuttle door opened, and Elena met her escort for the first time. His name was Kethrix, and he was not human. He stood 7 feet tall with a body covered in dark green plates and 4 arms that ended in delicate clawed fingers. His head was triangular, dominated by 2 massive compound eyes that reflected Elena's image back at her in 1,000 tiny fragments. Kethrix studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice a strange mixture of clicks and hums that somehow translated into perfect English through a device on his collar. "You are the one they chose? You are smaller than I expected." Elena looked up at him without flinching. "Size is not everything." Kethrix made a sound that might have been a laugh, perhaps, but strength matters in the Council. You will need more than clever words to survive what comes next. The journey to Axis Prime took 6 days. Elena spent most of that time reading, learning everything she could about the Council and its history. Kethrix answered her questions with a mixture of patience and pity. He seemed to genuinely believe that humanity was doomed. He wanted Elena to understand why. The Galactic Council had existed for over 12,000 years. It was founded by 7 ancient species who had grown tired of war and chaos. They created a system of laws and treaties that brought peace to the galaxy. Any new spacefaring species was required to present itself before the Assembly of Elders and request membership. Those who proved useful were integrated into the council as junior members. Those who proved dangerous were neutralized, and those who proved worthless were simply ignored, left to struggle alone in a galaxy that had no place for them. Every species that had come before humanity had followed the same pattern. They arrived at Axis Prime, stood before the elders, and begged for acceptance. They offered resources, technology, or military service. They promised to follow the Council's laws without question. They submitted. The Council expected humanity to do the same. Alina listened carefully to everything Kethrix told her. She asked about the species that had refused to submit. Kethrix's antennae twitched uncomfortably. There have been a few, he admitted. They no longer exist. The Council destroyed them. The Council did what was necessary to maintain peace. Alina nodded slowly. She did not argue. She did not react. But something changed in her eyes. A cold light that Kethrix did not notice. On the final night before they reached Axis Prime, Alina stood alone in the observation deck of the ship. Through the massive window, she could see their destination growing larger. Station the size of a small moon, rotating slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Somewhere on that station, the most powerful beings in the galaxy were waiting to judge her species. Alina thought about the briefing documents her government had prepared. 200 pages of suggested responses, diplomatic phrases, and carefully worded submissions. Every expert on Earth had contributed something. Every word had been chosen to maximize humanity's chances of survival. She pulled up the documents on her tablet, read through them one more time. Then she deleted them all. Humanity had sent her because she did not beg, and she was not going to start now. Axis Prime was the largest structure Alina had ever seen. As their shuttle approached, she realized that calling it a station did not capture its true nature. It was a city floating in space, a rotating wheel of metal and glass that housed millions of beings from across the galaxy. Lights flickered across its surface like stars that had been captured and tamed. Ships of every size and shape moved around it, docking and departing in an endless dance of commerce and diplomacy. Kethrix stood beside. Hers they descended toward the main docking bay. His compound eyes reflected the station's lights, and his antennae moved constantly, picking up signals and frequencies that Alina could not perceive. When we land, you will be taken to a preparation chamber, he explained. You will have 1 hour to rest and compose yourself. Then, you will be escorted to the assembly chamber to face the elders. Do you understand? I understand, Ambassador Vance. I must tell you something. Kethrix's voice dropped lower, almost gentle. I have served as an escort for many new species. I have seen them arrive with hope and leave with nothing. The Council is not cruel, but it is not kind either. It is efficient. It does what it believes is necessary for the greater peace of the galaxy. Alina turned to look at him. What are you trying to say? I am saying that you should prepare yourself for what is coming. The elders will offer you protectorate status. Your species will become a dependent of a more powerful civilization. It's required to provide resources or labor in exchange for protection. It is not slavery, but it is not freedom either. Most species accept this arrangement because the alternative is worse, and if we refuse, Kethrix was silent for a long moment. Then you will be offered nothing at all. And the Council will decide what to do with a species that has no value and no place in the galactic order. The shuttle landed with a soft thump. The doors opened, and Alina stepped out into a world unlike anything she had ever imagined. The docking bay was enormous, filled with beings of every shape and size. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others moved on for 6 or dozens of limbs. Some floated through the air, their bodies made of gas or light. Some were so large that Alina could have walked through their shadows without being noticed. And everywhere she looked, she saw eyes turning toward her. Studying the small creature that had come to stand before the Council, she felt incredibly alone. A team of guards escorted her through winding corridors to the preparation chamber. It was a simple room with a bench, a table, and a window that looked out over the station's central hub. Alina sat down and waited. The hour passed quickly, too quickly. When the door opened again, Ketherick stood waiting with 4 armored guards. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, and their weapons hummed with a low, threatening energy. "It is time," Ketherick said. They walked through a maze of hallways and lifts, each one more ornate than the last. The walls were covered with carvings that depicted the history of the Council. Thousands of years of peace and prosperity maintained through strength and order. Alina studied them as she walked, noting how every image showed lesser species bowing before greater ones. Finally, they reached the assembly chamber. The doors were 30 feet tall. Made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light, they swung open silently, revealing a space so vast that Elena's mind struggled to process it. The chamber was shaped like an amphitheater, with thousands of seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Every seat was filled. Beings from across the galaxy had come to witness humanity's judgment. At the far end of the chamber, raised above everything else, sat the 7 elders. They were the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, beings who had guided civilization for millennia. One was made entirely of energy, contained within a geometric shell that pulsed with light. Another was a creature of living crystal, its thoughts visible as patterns of color that rippled across its surface. A third was so massive that it required an anti-gravity field to support its weight. Alina walked to the center platform alone. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on her. This tiny creature from an unknown world who had dared to answer the Council's summons, Elder Voss spoke first. It was the being of energy, and its voice resonated through the chamber like thunder. "Species 7421, designated human, you have been summoned to account for your presence in this galaxy. Your world sits at the junction of 3 hyperspace corridors. Your system is strategically significant. You will now explain why the Council should permit your continued independence." Lena said nothing. The silence stretched. Voss flickered with impatience. "Speak, human. Others have begged for less time than you now waste with silence." Alina looked up at the assembled power of galactic civilization. She thought about everything she had learned during the journey here. She thought about the species that had submitted and the species that had been destroyed. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people waiting to learn their fate, and she thought about why they had chosen her. She took a breath and spoke a single word. No, the word was simple. It was quiet. But it struck the chamber like a physical blow. Silence. Total, absolute silence. Thousands of beings sat frozen, unable to process what they had just heard. In 12,000 years of galactic history, no petitioner had ever refused to plead their case. The very idea was unthinkable. Elder Voss's energy pattern flickered wildly, destabilizing for a moment before reforming. "No, you misunderstand the nature of this assembly. This is not a request. You will explain your worthiness, or face the consequences of your refusal." Lena's voice remained calm. "I understood perfectly. My answer is no. Humanity does not explain its right to exist. We do not justify our presence in our own solar system. We do not beg for permission to live in our own home." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate punishment. Others stared at Alina with expressions she could not read. The elders conferred among themselves, their thoughts moving faster than any human could follow, and Alina stood in the center of it all, alone and unmoved. The eye of a storm she had chosen to create. She did not know if she had just saved humanity or doomed it, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had done the right thing. The guards took Alina to a holding chamber deep within Axis Prime. The room was small and bare, with smooth metal walls and a single bench bolted to the floor. There was no window, no decoration, nothing to indicate that this place had ever held a living being before. It felt like a tomb. Alina sat on the bench and waited. She did not pace. She did not panic. She simply folded her hands in her lap and let her mind work through the possibilities. She had thrown a stone into a still pond. Now she had to see how far the ripples would spread. The door opened, and Ketherick entered. His usual calm was gone. His antennae twitched rapidly, and his compound eyes seemed darker than before, clouded with emotions that Alina was only beginning to understand. Do you have any idea what you have done? His voice was sharp, almost angry. In 12,000 years, no petitioner has ever refused to speak. The elders are in chaos. Half the council is demanding your immediate execution. The other half does not know what to think. Lena looked up at him. And which half do you belong to? Ketherick stopped pacing. He stared at her for a long moment, his mandibles clicking softly. I do not know, he admitted. I have served the council my entire life. I believed in its purpose. I believed that the system worked because it was fair. But watching you stand there, refusing to play the game we created, I found myself asking questions I've never asked before. What kind of questions? Questions that could get me killed. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Ambassador Vance, you must understand the situation. The Council maintains peace through the threat of overwhelming force. 700 species contribute to the peacekeeping armada. We have weapons that can crack planets and turn stars into bombs. No species in recorded history has ever successfully resisted the Council's will. Lena nodded slowly. I know. Then why? Why risk everything on a single word? Your planet has no fleet, no weapons, no allies. If the Elders choose intervention, humanity will be erased from the galaxy within a generation. Every man, woman, and child on Earth will either die or live the rest of their lives as slaves. Is that what you want? Alina stood and walked to the center of the room. She turned to face Ketherick, and something in her expression made him take a step back. Let me ask you something, she said. In those 12,000 years, how many species has the Council actually had to fight? Not threaten. Not intimidate. Not pressure into submission. Actually fight. Ketherick's antennae went still. He did not answer. That is what I thought. Alina began to pace slowly, her voice calm and measured. Your entire system is built on a simple idea. You show new species your power, and they calculate the odds, and they decide that submission is better than destruction. It is a rational choice. It is the smart choice. And for 12,000 years, every species has made the same calculation. She stopped and looked directly at Ketherick. But humanity did not calculate the odds of winning. We calculated the cost of fighting. Not to us, to you. What do you mean? I mean that your council has never been tested. You have never had to actually use your overwhelming force against a species that refused to surrender. You have never had to explain to your citizens why you destroyed an entire world just because they would not bow. You have never had to face the questions that would follow. Ketherick shifted uncomfortably. The council does what is necessary. Does it? Tell me, Ambassador, what happens when you destroy humanity? What message does that send to every other species in the galaxy? It sends a message that defiance will not be tolerated. Lena shook her head. No, it sends a message that the council was afraid. It tells everyone that a tiny, primitive species from a backwater planet scared you so badly that you had to wipe them out rather than let them exist. It proves that submission was never a choice. It was always just fear dressed up in polite language. She moved closer to Ketherick, her eyes never leaving his. Right now, 4,000 species are watching to see what happens next. Most of them submitted to the council, just like we were supposed to. They bent the knee, gave up their independence, and told themselves it was the smart thing to do. But every single one of them is now asking themselves the same question. What question? What if we had said no? The words hung in the air between them. Ketherick's antennae trembled. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress that Alina had learned to recognize during their journey together. You are playing a dangerous game, he said finally. The Elders will not simply let you walk away. They cannot. If they show weakness now, everything they have built will begin to crumble. I know. Alina returned to the bench and sat down again. But that is not my problem. I did not create this system. I did not build a galactic civilization on threats and fear. I just refused to participate in a ritual that was designed to make you feel powerful and make us feel small. Ketherick was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost uncertain. My species submitted to the council 600 years ago. We were proud once. We had our own culture, our own traditions, our own way of seeing the universe. But we looked at the Armada and decided that survival was more important than pride. So we gave up 17% of our population to serve in the peacekeeping forces. We followed every directive without question. We became good, obedient members of galactic civilization. He looked at Alina with eyes that suddenly seemed very old. I've spent my entire life believing that was the right choice. But watching you stand before the elders and refuse to bend, I realized something. We did not choose survival. We chose fear, and we have been living in that fear ever since. Lena said nothing. There was nothing to say. Outside the holding chamber, the debate continued. But something had already changed. A crack had appeared in the foundation of galactic order, and no amount of force could make it disappear. The ripples were spreading. The assembly chamber had not seen such chaos in centuries. Delegates from across the galaxy argued and shouted, their voices mixing into a wall of noise that filled every corner of the vast space. Some demanded blood. Others called for patience, and a growing number simply sat in silence, watching and waiting to see which way the tide would turn. At the center of it all, the 7 elders debated among themselves. Their conversation moved at speeds no ordinary being could follow, thoughts and ideas passing between them in streams of energy and light. But even at this level, there was no agreement. Elder Voss burned with fury. Its geometric shell pulsed with unstable light, a sign of emotional disturbance that had not been seen in millennia. The humans' refusal was an insult, a challenge to everything the council represented. Action must be taken. An example must be made. If word spread that a primitive species could simply say no and walk away, the entire structure of galactic civilization would collapse. Elder Yenix disagreed. The ancient silicon being had lived longer than most stars, and it had seen empires rise and fall across the galaxy. It counseled patience. The human had broken no laws, committed no crimes. She had simply refused to participate in a ceremony that, when examined closely, had no legal basis at all. Destroying her species for this would prove only that the council ruled through fear, not justice. The other elders fell somewhere between these positions. Some worried about the practical challenges of intervention. Humanity's solar system was indeed strategically valuable, but the resources required for a full military campaign would be enormous. Others worried about the political implications. Already, whispers were spreading through the galleries. Species that had been silent for generations were suddenly asking questions. Finally, Elder Morith spoke. Morith was the oldest being in the chamber. So old, in fact, that no one remembered what species it had once belonged to. Its original body had been replaced countless times over the millennia, until only thought remained, housed in a crystalline matrix that predated the council itself. When Morith spoke, everyone listened. I have watched this body govern for 9,000 years, Morith said. Its voice did not come through sound, but appeared directly in every mind present, a gentle pressure that demanded attention. In that time, I have seen us integrate thousands of species through promise and threat. I have seen us maintain order through the assumption that no rational being would choose destruction over submission. And I believed, truly believed, that this system was just. The chamber fell silent. Even the arguing delegates stopped to listen. This human has revealed a flaw in our design. She is not irrational. She has not acted out of ignorance or desperation. She has simply calculated differently than we expected. She looked at our power and our threats, and she decided that there were some things more important than survival. What could possibly be more important than survival? Elder Voss demanded. Dignity, Morith answered. The right to exist without having to justify that existence to anyone else. The freedom to stand tall in your own home, without bowing to visitors who claim authority they never earned. Voss flickered angrily. We earned our authority through strength and wisdom. We built galactic civilization from chaos. We brought peace to species that had known nothing but war. Did we? Or did we simply replace one form of war with another? Morith's thoughts carried a weight of sorrow that touched everyone present. Consider what we do here. A new species emerges into the galaxy, and we immediately demand that they prove their worth to us. We require them to submit to our judgment, to beg for permission to exist. And if they refuse, we destroy them. How is this different from the empires of conquest that we claim to have transcended? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. The human asked for nothing, Morith continued. She demanded nothing. She did not threaten us or challenge our right to exist. She simply refused to participate in a ritual that we created to make ourselves feel legitimate. And now we debate whether to destroy her entire species for this single act of quiet defiance? Elder Yennik shifted, its crystalline body catching the light. What do you propose, Morith? We cannot simply allow this to stand. The precedent would be catastrophic. Would it? Look around this chamber. Morath directed attention to the galleries, where thousands of delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. Look at how they watch us now. They are already asking the question that the human planted. They are already wondering what would have happened if their ancestors had made a different choice. Voss burned brighter. Then we must act quickly. Crush the humans. Show the galaxy that defiance leads only to destruction. Restore order before these dangerous thoughts spread further. And prove every word she said, Morith replied calmly. Prove that submission was always a lie. Prove that we offered no true choice, only the illusion of one. Prove that for 12,000 years we have ruled through fear and called it civilization. The silence that followed was absolute. I am old, Morith said finally. Older than any of you can truly understand. I have seen countless species come and go. I have watched the galaxy change in ways that once seemed impossible. And I have learned that the most dangerous moment for any empire is not when it faces external threats, but when it faces internal questions it cannot answer. The crystalline matrix pulsed with ancient light. This human has asked us a question. Not with weapons or threats, but with a single word. And I fear that any answer we give will destroy something. If we destroy humanity, we destroy the lie that our system is just. If we let them go, we destroy the lie that our power is absolute. Morath paused, letting the weight of its words sink in. The question is not what to do with the humans. The question is, what kind of civilization we want to be? And that is a question that each of you must answer for yourself. The debate continued for 3 more days, but something fundamental had shifted. The certainty that had guided the council for millennia had cracked. And in the galleries watching and waiting, thousands of species were beginning to remember what it felt like to ask questions. On the 4th day, Alina Vance was brought back to the assembly chamber. The galleries were even more crowded than before. Species that had never attended a council session had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the verdict. Ships had been arriving at Axis Prime in unprecedented numbers, their passengers desperate to see history being made. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. Alina walked to the center platform alone. She wore the same simple clothes she had worn on the first day. Her face showed no fear, no hope, no expectation. She simply stood and waited. Elder Voss spoke first. Its geometric shell had stabilized, but there was something different about its light. Something dimmer. Ambassador Alina Vance of Earth, the Council has deliberated for 3 days on the matter of your species. We have considered every argument, examined every precedent, and consulted the wisdom of ages. And we have reached a decision. Alina said nothing. We find ourselves in an unprecedented position. You have broken no law. You have made no threat. You have committed no crime against the peace of the galaxy. You have simply refused to participate in a ceremony that we must admit has no legal foundation beyond tradition. A murmur rippled through the galleries. Therefore, we hereby recognize humanity as an independent spacefaring civilization. You will be subject to standard treaties and trade agreements, with full rights to your home system and any territories you may peacefully settle. You will not be required to submit to protectorate status or provide tribute to any existing power. The murmur grew louder. Alina remained still. However, Voss continued, and there was something almost pleading in its voice. We ask for an explanation. Not as a requirement. Not as a condition of this ruling. Simply for our understanding. For our records, why? Why did you risk everything your species had on a single word? Alina looked up at the elders. She looked at the galleries filled with beings from across the galaxy. She thought about the question carefully before answering. Because you needed to hear it, she said. Not from us specifically. From anyone. 12,000 years of civilization, and no one ever reminded you that the word no exists. That is a long time to forget something so important. She turned slowly, addressing not just the elders but everyone present. Humanity is not special. We are not braver than the species who came before us. We are not stronger or smarter or more worthy of freedom. We simply arrived at the right moment. After millennia of submission, after generations of obedience, we happened to be the species that looked at your system and asked, "Why?" Her voice echoed through the silent chamber. Why must new species prove their worth to older ones? Why must the young bow to the ancient? Why must anyone justify their right to exist in their own home? These are not questions of power or strategy. They are questions of basic dignity. And the fact that no one had asked them for 12,000 years does not mean they did not matter. She paused, letting her words sink in. You built something impressive here. A civilization that spans the galaxy. Peace between species that once destroyed each other. Order where there was chaos, but you built it on a foundation of fear. You built it on the assumption that beings will always choose survival over dignity. And for a very long time, you were right. Lena looked directly at Elder Voss. But fear has an expiration date. Eventually, someone was going to remember that they had a choice. Eventually, someone was going to stand before you and say no. It just happened to be us. The silence stretched on. Then, from somewhere in the galleries, a sound began. It was soft at first, barely audible, but it grew, it spread. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species began to make noise. Some clapped. Some stomped. Some produced sounds that Alina had never heard before. But the meaning was clear. They were applauding. Elder Morith's crystalline matrix pulsed with warm light. Ambassador Vance, the Council thanks you for your honesty. You are free to return to your world with our recognition and our respect. May your species find peace among the stars? Lena bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Elder. I hope that we can build something better together. All of us. She turned and walked toward the exit. Kethrix was waiting for her at the door. His posture was different than before, straighter, prouder. Ambassador Vance, he said, quietly as she approached. I have just transmitted a message to my government. I have recommended that we begin reviewing our arrangement with the Council. Lena stopped. And what did they say? Kethrix's mandibles clicked, and what Alina had learned was a smile. They said they had been waiting 600 years for someone to go first. They walked out of the chamber together. Behind them, the noise continued to grow. Representatives were clustering, speaking in urgent tones, pulling up communications to their homeworlds. Old alliances were being questioned. New possibilities were being discussed. Something that had been frozen for 12,000 years was finally beginning to move. Alina did not look back. She did not need to. She could feel the change in the air. The electricity of a galaxy waking up from a long sleep. On the journey home, Kethrix told her what was happening across the stars. Species that had been silent for centuries were suddenly asking for renegotiation of their treaties. The peacekeeping armada was facing questions about its purpose and authority. Young beings on 1,000 worlds were watching recordings of Elena's speech and asking their elders difficult questions. You have started something that cannot be stopped, Kethrix said. The galaxy will never be the same. I did not start anything, Alina replied. I just said a word that everyone had forgotten. The rest was always there, waiting. When she returned to Earth, Alina Vance was greeted as a hero, but she refused the celebrations and the medals. She had done nothing heroic. She had simply remembered something that all beings know in their hearts but to often forget. The right to exist is not something that must be earned. It is not a gift that can be given by the powerful it. It is not a privilege that can be taken away at it. It simply is. And sometimes, the most powerful thing anyone can do is to stand tall and remind the universe of that simple truth. 50 years later, historians would call the transformation the Great Rebalancing. The Galactic Council was restructured entirely, not through war, but through a cascade of peaceful renegotiations. Fear gave way to genuine cooperation. Obedience gave way to mutual respect, and in the archives of Axis Prime, a single recording was preserved for future generations. It showed a small human woman standing alone before the assembled might of galactic civilization. It showed her listening to their demands, and it showed her speaking a single word that changed everything. No, one word, one moment of quiet. Courage. One reminder that dignity is not something that can ever be taken away. It can only be surrendered. And humanity chose not to surrender.